Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I have Tori with me, and we're going to be talking about this idea of cyber psychology and kind of how it relates to the workplace. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody an introduction?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tori, as Emma just said. I'm a vice president analyst at Gartner, which means that I get paid to think about things. In fact, I'm wearing my favorite t-shirt. Hold on, let me overthink things. And one of the things I focus on is centering humans in conversations about technology. And that's what I did before Gartner, and now I get paid to do it and think about it all the time.
Well, I'm really excited for this conversation for a number of reasons. But I think to get us started, I teased this idea of cyber psychology. Can you just define what this idea is and kind of what that term means before we dive into the rest of the discussion?
Yeah. So Gartner has a lot of definitions for things, and this is one of the more succinct definitions. It means examining really how humans feel and behave in digital environments. So I'll give you an example. How humans experience our interactions with, let's say, conversational generative AI agents, right? And one of the things that we've seen over the last few decades is that we believe that we've moved through various workforce management eras. So starting with human capital management, humans as assets, and then moving into people and culture as humans started, as workers started to see the value shift with organizations. And now I believe that we're in the era of human success. So this is that first bit, how humans interact and how they behave in digital environments is really important. The second bit, though, is how humans interact with each other through technology. And Emma, I would ask you, do you have different types of conversations with the same friend on different platforms, right? Text message versus Instagram. We recently had this debate on our team about the use of voice memos. Someone who's in the Gen X category like me was going, what's with all these voice memos? And a Gen Z, a colleague of ours said, oh, well, we leave voice memos when we don't want things to be screenshot, right? And then lastly, in that space, we've all seen what scientists will call the online disinhibition, I've said that wrong, effect. Nobody can say that word. But the reality is that most of our communication as humans is nonverbal. It's composed of the way we move our hands and our eye contact and the tone and patterns of our speech. And so without that information, humans get really uncertain. And when we're uncertain, our lizard brains go, fight or flight. So that's what we mean by cyber psychology.
One, I love that you're okay, Gartner has a lot of definitions for things because that is, in fact, what you guys are probably best known for. But this idea of cyber psychology is so interesting, and especially kind of some of the after effects that start to come from kind of this personalization and these changes in terms of our social behavior across platforms. I was actually having a conversation about voice memos over Thanksgiving with my niece and nephew who are in high school and college. And my husband was like, do you guys do this? Is this a cultural thing? Because they're also big on WhatsApp, but neither one of them gave us the secret that that's when they don't want things screenshotted. So they were gatekeeping some of that from us. But when we take a look at, the information and the data that you were just mentioning in terms of this catalog of what we now understand as cyber psychology, what does all of that data that we now have access to and at our disposal tell us about the desire for personalization?
Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to see how people, perceive this, because I'm going to put some glaring statistics, and I'm applying the glaring judgment, that word, right? But one of the things that we found is that outside of work, so I'm not talking about the amount of time you spend writing emails or writing documents, but outside of work, on average, adults spend about 7 hours a day of their waking hours online. Right. That's about 40% of your waking hours engaging with digital technology outside, again, of your work. And then we also found that 90% of US adults say that they consume their most of their news from a mobile device, and more than half say that they get most of their news from social media. So one last bit there, which is that 90% or more of our digital experiences, so we're talking social media, shopping, search, streaming, even news, are now personalized by algorithms. Now, these algorithms align the content that we see to our personal interests, and it's designed specifically to maximize our engagement, aka keep us engaging. And if you're thinking like, oh, well, what does that look like? What is the footprint, or I call it the exhaust, right? What is the exhaust coming out of us? I'll just give you one example. Meta uses an algorithm that the last time someone published about it analyzes over 100,000 factors to decide what makes it to your feed. So the first part of that question, or the answer to that question, Emma, is that most of us have little to almost no awareness of that exhaust that we're leaving behind as we go through our dwells and our visits and our likes and our shares. And I would say a vast majority of us have no awareness that it's not just our interactions that nurture and improve our personalized algorithm. It's the interactions of our friends and our connections. Now, I think I said this to you when we talked the first time, but a lot of folks say, well, I think Instagram is listening to me. I think, insert whatever is listening to me. And this might be why, you might find yourself getting, and this will be a personal anecdote here, right? And a bunch of ads for companies who sell really cool rugs to millennials the day after your spouse tells you that they'd like a new rug for the living room over dinner. It's not because they're listening to your dinner conversation. It's because of those hundreds of thousands of signals that are being gathered about you, your spouse, your friends, etc. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that that's like such a good piece to put out there, is that like there's more information than just your interactions. And we don't necessarily think about that type of relationship with technology, because up until the last couple of years, that type of relationship with technology just plain didn't exist.
Yeah,
And, and so I think that this is a perfect kind of bridge for us then to start talking about, like, a lot of times when we talk about personalization, people think that that pertains just to buying behavior. So like, I want a personalized buying experience. I want the rug to show up on my phone right when I need it so that I can go through that purchase. But it also entails enterprise and B2B purchasing, as well as downstream effects. And like, one of the areas that you and I both focus a lot on is how do we bring humans into the technology space and make it really attainable. So how are all of these data points and this personalization going to flow into the enterprise space beyond just purchasing? So I'm interacting with my brand new enterprise technology solution. How is personalization and all of that data going to play in?
Yeah. I mean, I love that question. And even as sort of I transition into that question, I've done a pretty good job, I think, of making it sound kind of scary, but also one of the best parts of algorithmic digital life is that people who felt alone don't have to feel alone anymore, right? So, for example, if you're enamored with a mountain-dwelling creature named a pika, for me example, right? You will find your people. You will find message boards filled with pictures of mountain dwelling pikas from all over the world. So there's that bit of it that is really, really, really appealing. Now, we have the effects, right? Which echo chamber effect, and the fact that algorithms tend to prioritize sensational content, even if it's misinformation, all of that. But these are things we can manage in the enterprise far more than we can manage in our personal lives, right? We can't change the algorithm that an organization like Meta uses. We can just choose to engage with it in different ways if we don't want it to be guiding so much of our behavior. But I'll preface the, how would this enterprise or impact enterprise technology with this personal story about when I was a digital workplace leader. We were rolling out a new, application to replace a very core application. So core application to new core application, one that had not ever been used before in our organization, and all 20,000 users needed to use it. And I said to my boss, I said, I'm going to write an email. And the first part of the email is going to be change is hard, period. Right. I was going to just acknowledge that change is hard. And I'll tell you, he was like, no, No, we can't say that. We can't let them know that we know that change is hard, right? And I think that really reflects that understanding how workers feel about technology is one of the areas that is most often, let's say, underinvested in, right? So the very first thing that organizations need to do if they're taking a cyber psychology approach to enterprise apps is to develop what I call a listening strategy. And this includes telemetry about applications, devices, services, things that they use, and bringing that together to complement it with sentiment. And this would allow people to find, well, how do people really feel about technology and the interactions that they're having with technology? How are they coping with the fact that there's a huge amount of perpetual updates and pressure to take advantage of technology as a worker, as an organization? We might even call this FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. Also, what are the frictions that exist? Do they even perceive it? I tell people all the time, like most of us as workers, right, especially interacting with technology, are boiling frogs. I'll give you 3 points that I think proves this. First, more than a third of workers say that about half of the time they go looking for information, they can't find it. Half of the time. 21% say that about half of the time they miss important updates due to the volume of information. So again, personalization there. And 16%, that's a little more than 1 in 10, say that about half of the time they make the wrong decision due to a lack of awareness. So the first bit of the solve for this is that we really do need to be thinking about how people are experiencing technology and how can we use personalization to solve some of these things that I would say are arguably really big, business problems. So that's step one. Now, we haven't even talked about how people feel about AI and how they're interacting with AI. And do they trust the output? And do they use it often? One of the things we found in our study about digital workers is that just using AI on a daily basis has more productivity benefit than having skills with AI. So just using it on a regular basis. And as we move into this next year, which is going to be all about agentic AI, right? We really need to be understanding how people feel because this is really challenging workers to give more authority and more autonomy to their AI assistants and agents. So that's bit number one. I know that was a big bit number one. Bit number two is about digital dexterity. And this is, in fact, I think one of the most succinct definitions that Gartner has. Digital dexterity is the ability and ambition to use technology for better business outcomes. And we isolated these workers in our digital worker study. And what we found is that when workers have expertise and they said that their skills are tapped by their organization, they're 95% more likely to be much more productive year over year. Right? So now we've looked at, hey, how do they feel? How can we make them feel, or how can we highlight how well they can, engage with technology, and then what is the impact on their productivity? And the third is application autonomy. And so this is the one where most enterprise apps leaders are like, I can't give any more autonomy. I'm tasked with reducing duplicative apps. I'm tasked with normalizing, usage across single platforms or as few as we can. And I'll tell you right now, I have now changed my mind. I do not think that digital workplace leaders should be doing that. In fact, I don't think that workers in general even know what an application is anymore. And one of the most paradoxical findings that we found in this study was that workers who use more than the average number of applications have more digital friction. So all of those things I said that were challenges, they're more amplified. But they also feel more productive, are more satisfied with their applications, and happier with IT and the services that IT offers. So really we need to maybe think like, well, maybe we're thinking about this the wrong way.
I think that I was shocked when you shared that idea with me, that like, even though they're technically like more friction filled experiences, that people feel better about them, goes to
Yeah.
show the power of perception and the power that like comes with feeling like you're a part of a process and on a team and working towards something together, as opposed to maybe having this like super frictionless experience that you had no say in shoved at you.
Yes.
That's a very interesting dynamic for me. That was surprising, but at the same time, not.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're giving, and I'm giving a little a tease of what we'll be talking about in the keynote, but I'm going to give you the answer right now. Everybody can have the answer. I want everyone to have the answer, right? There's a cognitive bias called the IKEA effect, named after the furniture company. And it has three rules. One, people may like what you give them. Two, if you want people to value something, you have to let them build it. And three, if you want people to love something, you have to help let them shape it, right? And I think you could just call this the IT effect, right? It doesn't have to be the IKEA effect. And so if we're thinking about what do we want to be able to provide workers that's going to help them, that's going to be psychology or cyber psychology minded, and also get them to love the stuff that we're giving to them, we want to think about having an app marketplace, an improved internal app marketplace where people can explore approved apps and ask for permission to bring new apps in. We certainly want to be building a persona-based AI-driven personalization for certain personas, right? So we need to identify the high impact personas that have business critical outcomes where personalization can increase their productivity. So for example, if you're have a sales workforce that is tasked with improving customer retention, right? You want to be able to build customizations on top of your CRM that allow them to do that. And then finally, we want to be able to allow workers to blend. And that's where that if you want people to love something, give them platforms that they can customize, where they can prioritize, what data visualization is most important, or help them build no-code automations for custom tasks. There's things like that. And then really lastly, for the folks that listen to your, that watch your videos, right, think about themselves. I think that people, especially in technology roles, need to think about firing themselves and hiring themselves, right? And thinking about whether they need to build some of these cyber psychology, behavioral science skills in order to be successful in their roles.
Well, and I think that this idea of like AI being used for this level of personalization is really one of the big keys, because like when I think back to when I was selling technology, we had personalized personas. You could build personal pages. More often than not, IT liked to lock that down because they didn't like the idea of trying to troubleshoot something that was personalized for every user.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're able to do it in the same way that we do it with an algorithm on social media, it takes away some of the administrative burden and some of the hurdles that stood in the way of that kind of like user-led adoption, and makes it more attainable for us and kind of offsetting this stuff that maybe got in our way before to the technology. And those are going to be the use cases where like AI allows us to become more personalized, more human, lean more into that aspect of things, and allowing the technology to take care of the bits and bops that need to be managed that no one wanted to deal with before. And so that's the stuff that I get really excited about, because I think that's the stuff that moves the needle. Obviously, AI algorithms that do lots of things and solve big problems for us help as well. But we're not going to be to the point where we've got this generalized intelligence doing everybody's job in the next 5 years. So what are the use cases where we legitimately are improving our experience and our ability to execute and leaning more into being human are the things that I get most excited about.
Yeah, and how are we? I was just talking with a client this morning. Workforce of 3,000 that is part of a workforce of 200,000, but these 3,000 folks are getting access to a conversational AI, and they'll be tracking, right, how it's used and what are the prompts and things like that. And so this particular leader I was talking to this morning has a prompt engineer on staff who is there to help design the best prompts to get the most out of the workforce. But this leader said, this person in this role as the prompt engineer has a shelf life, because where I have one prompt engineer, I will soon have 3,000 prompt engineers, and I need a path for this particular individual who's high performing individual on the leader's team to then move on to the next thing and then the next thing. And so how you tease that out, right? How can we target the funded AI, algorithmic personalization to business roles and really moments that matter the most. So that's part one. And then part two, how can we employ this listening strategy that helps us to identify the best stuff out there, and then again, bring it over here and scale it for larger impact. So those two things I think work together.
Yeah. Well, you already teased a little bit, but do you want to tell everyone where we're going to be in March together?
Yeah. So Emma and I and another 20 plus number of my amazing colleagues are going to be in Grapevine, Texas, March 12th and 13th for the kickoff of 3 digital workplace summits around the world. So we're super excited to be doing that. And, like I said to Emma earlier, I've teased a little bit of what you're going to hear in the keynote, as well as some amazing sessions from particularly my colleagues, Cynthia Phillips and Craig Roth, who have sessions that are exactly about this type of cyber psychology that tech leaders would employ.
Yeah, so if you haven't already, I'll put a link into the description for you to check out the event and hopefully come join us in Texas. It's in March. Like if you're up from the northern part of the country like we are, you're going to want to go down to Texas come March. So it's kind of like a win-win situation.
Yes.
But Tori, thank you so much for joining me for the discussion, and for everybody for watching, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. If you like what you saw, be sure to come back on a weekly basis and subscribe for more expert interviews focused on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.